welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video we're going to learn the 2 to 4 player game Crusaders, designed by Seth Jaffe and published by Tasty Minstrel Games, who helped sponsor this video. As the leader of an order of knights, it's not enough to just conquer your enemies. You also have to erect buildings, fund your army, and spread your influence. And it would be a lot easier to impress the king with your efforts if there weren't so many other knights trying to accomplish the same thing. I guess you're just going to have to be the best at it. So join me at the table, and let's learn how to play. To set up, have each player take one of these boards in their chosen color, along with the matching colored wedges, troop tokens, building pieces, and a scoring aid. In this video, we'll be setting up a 2-player game, returning the other colors to the box. Have one player shuffle their wedges, and then randomly arrange them around this action wheel. And these are double-sided, so ensure that the side showing only a single symbol on their outer edge is the one that's face up. Then all the other players will arrange their wedges in the exact same pattern. Now take these troop tokens and flip them face down, arranging them into the slots for them here at the top of your board, ordered from lowest to highest by the values printed on them. Next, take note of the icons to the left of each of these lines. These are the symbols for castles, churches, barns, and banks. You'll then take the matching shaped building tokens and put one in each space for them according to those rows. It'll look something like this when you're done. You'll also have 2 spaces for knights, which you'll place like this, leaving you with 1 extra that we'll use later. These are the knight order tiles, and you'll shuffle and deal 2 to each player. Have them pick 1 to keep, putting it here, returning all the others back to the box. If someone takes the Montesa, they will also get this black knight. Otherwise, it's returned to the box as well. Each knight order will indicate how many of these action tokens you should collect, and the default value is 12, with 2 being placed on each of the wedges. For example, this one says to collect 13 action tokens, placing the extra one anywhere I like, and I also get to upgrade one of my wedges. We'll learn more about upgrading later, but basically it just means to pick one of your wedges and flip it over, returning any action tokens that it had. In the center of the table, place the double-sided board with the side face up that shows your number of players, so 2 in this case. Locate the 3 types of enemy tokens which are identified by their crests. There's Prussian, Slav, and Saracen. Put 1 Prussian and 1 Slav into the top spaces for them here on their strength tracks. Then collect all the rest and randomly put 1 into every square space of the board that shows one of these flags. Also ensure that every Saracen token has their crest side face down. It'll look something like this when you're done, and any leftover tokens you have can be returned to the box. These are the building bonus tiles, which you will also randomly put with this side face up into every matching space found on the board. Nearby, also place these enemy majority award tiles stacked into 3 separate piles by enemy type. The one on top should say most defeated, and the one underneath should say second most defeated. And the sides that talk about there being ties should be face down to begin with. Now check the number showing on the board by your player count and set that value of these influence tokens into a supply near the board. The rest that are left over you'll keep separate, and they'll only be used at the end of the game once you're instructed to. Finally, pick a starting player at random, and then beginning with the person seated to their right and going in counterclockwise order, each player will take their unused knight piece and set it onto an empty starting region, which are the hexes that show a knight symbol on them. And that's the setup. In Crusaders, Thy Will Be Done, players will be performing a variety of activities that will help them gain influence. But you'll never be directly fighting with the other players because you're all part of the same army. You just want to bring the most glory to your knightly order. The game is played over a series of turns, starting with the first player, and then going clockwise around and around the table. On your turn, you'll pick one of 2 options to perform, as shown here on your board. Either you'll resolve an action or upgrade a wedge. And let's begin with resolving actions. There are 5 different types, and they're represented by the symbols that you find here on the wedges of your action wheel. Most will only have 1. But if a wedge has been upgraded, like this one was during the setup, it will have 2 different actions. Either way, to resolve an action, you pick a wedge and then count the number of these action tokens on it. That value indicates the starting strength of that action. For example, this is the symbol for building, and if I chose this wedge, I'd have a building strength of 2. As we'll see, later in the game, as some of these different pieces are removed from the board, they can boost the strength of certain actions. For example, if this one was gone, it shows the build action symbol, and that means it adds +1 to that action. And these bonuses are cumulative. So if this one was also gone, now each time I built, I would get a bonus strength of +2. So now I would currently have a building strength of 4. We'll see how these get removed a little bit later, and we'll also go through all the various different types of actions and how they work. But just understand that once an action has been resolved, you will collect all the tokens from its wedge and distribute them one at a time clockwise around your action wheel, starting with the very next one. So for example, I would place them like this. Now as you can see, I've made these other actions stronger. If on a future turn I chose this wedge, it would have a power of 3, where before it only had 2. Knowing this, you can start to plan ahead, thinking about how the actions you're about to take will influence and improve actions that you want to take later. And you may even find you get so many action tokens on a wedge that when you go to distribute them after completing that action, they wrap all the way around and just keep going. And that's fine. Just continue to place your tokens one space at a time without skipping any. If you choose to resolve an upgraded wedge, then you split the tokens there however you like between both actions, performing both in either order, but ensuring that you fully resolve one before starting the next. You can even choose to just resolve one of the actions, assigning no tokens to the other one, but you must have assigned at least one token to an action if you wish to perform it. For example, if I decided to use all 3 of these tokens for travel, I couldn't also build, even if I had a build bonus revealed like this. Now, whether you perform just 1 or 2 actions, once they are both completed, pick up the tokens from the wedge and distribute them in the same way as we saw before. Again, we'll go over how to resolve all these various actions, but first remember, instead of resolving an action on your turn, you can choose to upgrade a wedge. Each one found on your action wheel will have 2 sides, and if the side face up shows only a single symbol here, then it can be upgraded. And to do this, you just remove any action tokens on it temporarily while you flip the wedge over and then place those tokens back on. You can see here there are grayed out symbols on each wedge that you haven't upgraded yet to let you know what action will be added once it's flipped over. In this case, the wedge here gained this Crusade action. After upgrading, you may then optionally pick any wedge, it doesn't have to be the one you just upgraded, and distribute its action tokens as we saw before. And those are the 2 different options for your turn, either resolving an action or upgrading a wedge. Now in very rare cases, you may have already upgraded all of your wedges and the actions that you have available aren't ones that you want to take. In those situations, you can just choose to skip your turn and pick a single wedge and distribute its action tokens. Now again, it's very rare that that would happen, but there is a rule for it. Now though, let's take a look at the different actions that you'll find on your wedges and see how they work. First, let's talk about travel. You'll start with only 1 knight on the board, but later, as we'll see, you can unlock more. And with this action, you can divide the total number of your travel points, which again is based on the number of action tokens here, among the knights that you have in play. For each point you spend, you can leave the hex, also known as a region, that you are in to go to an adjacent one. However, if the space that you are leaving contains one of these circular enemy tokens, then it will cost you 2 points to leave from there. Other players' pieces are not enemies, and you can enter and leave those spaces without any additional penalty. This is the muster action, and to perform it, first check the cost shown here on the lowest troop token you have. Their levels are shown as Roman numerals here in these yellow banners. So the cost in this case is 3. And if your muster value is equal to or greater than that value, you flip this token to its mustered side. This will reveal a Crusade symbol, which will increase the value of your Crusade actions later. You also gain a number of influence equal to the Roman numeral that was on the back, so in this case, you'd gain 1 influence. Anytime you gain influence, you take it from the supply by the board and put it in front of yourself. You'll win by having the most influence at the end of the game. This symbol represents the Crusade action. To perform it, choose a single region containing one of your knights and an enemy token. Check the strength of that enemy by looking at the value shown on its track here. For example, all Prussian tokens currently have a strength of 3. Slavs would have the same, and Saracens always have a strength of 6. Your strength, which is the number of tokens on the Crusade wedge that you chose, plus any other bonuses that you may have revealed, must be equal to or greater than the enemy's strength. If not, then you cannot take this action. Otherwise, you complete the Crusade and collect influence equal to the enemy's strength. So 3 in this case, which you would again take from the supply and set in front of yourself. You then move the strength marker of the enemy you defeated 1 space down the track, making all future enemies of that type harder to fight, but also increasing the influence gained when they are defeated. Finally, take the enemy token and place it beside you for scoring at the end of the game. Fighting Saracen tokens is a little different. As mentioned, their strength is always 6, but when you defeat them, you don't collect 6 influence. Instead, you have 2 choices. One is to take the token and resolve its symbol, or take the token but ignore the symbol and gain 3 influence. If you choose to resolve the symbol, then take the leftmost building of that type from your board and put it in the square space here. You'll then gain an amount of influence equal to the level of that building, which is the Roman numeral shown inside of the yellow flag beside the space where it came from. So in this situation, the player would gain 1 influence. If you're resolving this symbol after fighting a Saracen, collect its token and then flip the leftmost face-down troop token you have and gain influence equal to its level. Now we come to the build action. Only 1 building can be constructed per region, and only in a region with one of your knights that doesn't also have a circle enemy token there. This means that you or another player in a previous action will often had to have performed a crusade there before you can take the action to build. Though you will also find there are a number of regions on the board, including the starting ones, that do not have any enemy tokens and can be built on right away. When you're ready to perform this action, choose a type of building and check the cost shown in the small gray hexagon on the lowest level building of that type. And remember, the level is shown here by these yellow flags. The value, or cost, must be equal to or lower than the value of the action that you're taking. However, be sure to check all of the building bonus tokens in that region as well. These may decrease the cost of certain types of buildings that you would want to construct there. For example, if you were building a barn, it would cost 1 less, but if you were building a church, as we're doing here, it would cost 2 less. If you can afford the cost, place your chosen building on the square of that region and collect influence tokens equal to the level of that building and any bonus influence that may be showing on the building bonus tiles there. For example, because I built a church here, I gain a bonus influence token. As we mentioned earlier, for each new building you construct, you will reveal a new bonus that will affect future related actions. For example, now each time I take a future influence action, which we'll be talking about in a moment, I will gain 1 more point of influence to add to the tokens on my wedge. If you ever build a castle that has a knight beside it, you also unlock that knight, placing it directly into the same region where the castle was built. The level 4 buildings also provide additional points at the end of the game, as we'll see later. But just note that all bonuses revealed add together. For example, if I take the Crusade action, I get the points from the tokens on the wedge, plus any revealed Crusade symbols. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 would be the total strength of my Crusade. The final type of action is called Influence, and to perform this, simply gain a number of influence tokens equal to the number of action markers here, not forgetting to also gain any bonuses that might come from removed buildings. And those are all of the actions. But keep in mind, each player has one of these knight order tiles. And in addition to sometimes changing the setup rules, these may have other ongoing abilities. For example, when this player is distributing their action tokens after resolving an action, instead of just being able to go clockwise, they can choose to go counterclockwise instead. All the abilities are defined on the tiles themselves, but if you want answers to further questions you might have, or some history about the orders themselves, you can find it here on these pages of the rulebook. Either way, the game continues around and around the table with players taking turns until eventually the final point of influence has been claimed from the supply. But you also need to ensure that all of the players have had an equal number of turns. So if I had been the first player and claimed that last point of influence, the other player would get 1 more turn, and then the game would end. Also, you still collect any influence you are owed after the supply runs out, just take it from the extras that were put aside during the setup. And if these run out and you still need more, just use a suitable replacement. Now it's time for the final scoring, where players will check to see who has the most of each type of enemy token, and those players will collect the appropriate reward from those put beside the board during the setup. How these are distributed works the same for each type of enemy token, so I'll just explain this using the Prussians. The player who has the most defeated tokens of that particular type will collect this top tile, which is worth 5 influence points. And the player with the second most defeated tokens will then take this tile, which is worth 2 influence. Now, if instead there had been a tie between the players for having the most tokens, they will take this top tile and flip it over. Here it says that all of the tied players gain 3 influence points, so you might give this to one of the players, and the other could collect 3 influence from the leftover supply. And then, as you see here, no second place tile is awarded. Now, in a game with more than 2 players, where there isn't a tie for first place, but there is a tie for second, you will instead flip this second place tile over, where each tied player will gain 1 influence point. Finally, add the influence you get for each 4th level building space you revealed. On this 4th castle space, you'll get 4 influence for each unique set of enemy tokens you have. For building your 4th church, you'll gain 6 influence. You'll get 1 influence for each of your knights on the board and each mustered troop you have on this farm row, and 4 influence for every 4th level building you constructed, including this one. Now the player with the most points wins, and in the case of a tie, the tied players share the victory. Although it's not printed in the rulebook, the designer did tell me that I could offer this tie-breaking rule if players are unhappy, rejoicing in a shared victory. Instead, the tied player who went earlier in the turn order is declared the victor. You'll also find 4 variants included in the game to allow you to further tailor the game to your tastes, either simplifying the setup of the action wheel or allowing it to be randomized. But I'll leave these for you to discover on your own. If you have any questions, though, about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the game's page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. But if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notifications anytime we post a video. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.